Welcome to RSA Conference 2023. We are recording live in Broadcast Alley in Moscone West. I am your host, Matt Alderman. Joining me for this interview segment is Brian Kenyon. He is the Chief Strategy Officer for Island.io.
That's right.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
So Island's gotten a lot of press lately, out building an enterprise browser. But before we get there,
Yeah.
I'm an app user data guy.
Okay.
So I love the space, and I think what most people don't realize is that the browser is like the main interface into all modern applications. So it falls in the app realm to me, but I don't think most people think of it as an application sometimes.
Absolutely not. And I don't think most people think of it. It's really just a gateway to your content, whether that just be in your personal life, browsing the internet, or the content or what organizations would consider their data inside the corporate world.
Right. And so we understand the challenges with application security and protecting my applications and all the downstream effects, but we don't think about protecting the browser or how the browser is actually a potential security loophole in the overall process.
Well, I think we've always understood the challenge around the browser. What we've not been able to do is really anything about it. So what we've done as practitioners and as manufacturers of cybersecurity solutions is we've built around it. And so we call it, network DLP, we call it web gateways, we call it next-gen firewalls, we call it CASB, we call it packet brokers. These are all technologies that oscillate around the browser to try to give an organization some control of what it can or can't do.
Right.
But we've never thought about actually just controlling the browser until recently.
Right.
And that's what we've really done at Island.
Yeah. We did make one progress. We did kill Internet Explorer, finally.
Yes, although, Internet Explorer still lives around and lurks.
Okay.
Microsoft has left a lot of the rendering components on the OS, which is good, because unfortunately a lot of those apps haven't gone away. Some of the largest banks, some of the largest corporations live and die by apps that were written 10, 15 years ago.
Right.
And so having that compatibility back to those previous versions is actually a really important part of our business as an enterprise browser.
So what's the root problem with the browser? If you could narrow it down to one or two things, what is instinctively just wrong about the existing browser?
The browser in its current form as a consumer-based browser is inherent trust. And so let me take you on a little exercise with this. So you've authenticated, you have your rights to get to the data, you're inside an application like Salesforce, or it doesn't matter, ServiceNow, something an organization's written. Your rights and your roles say that you can see the data. So what does it do? The data renders to the browser screen. Now the problem is, you now have lost all control of that data, because somebody could take a screen capture, they can copy and paste it, they can print it, they can save the HTML. All of your wonderful network solutions do nothing when that end user's on the NPC with the data. And so what the enterprise browser is really helping organizations do is not only get control and secure the browser as a vector, but it's to help organizations secure the data from escaping from all of the channels that have been left unprotected over the years.
So we give people access to the system, but then we give them the loophole by just rendering anything they wanted in the browser, and now we have a data security problem.
Yeah, think about it this way, right? Think about how a call center was in, kind of the pre-pandemic days. You'd show up for work, you had a desktop computer, you went into almost like a skiff-like environment where you weren't allowed to bring your device in, you weren't allowed to bring paper and pencil in, but you had a monitor, a keyboard, a mouse, and a phone. And you got on the phone and you worked with customers all day. Then the pandemic hits and all these people go home. And guess what? They still need to access the same data.
Right.
And so how do you prevent that data from then leaving that session of a browser and remaining on that device? Very hard to do. A lot of organizations had to operate with exceptions just because they had to keep the doors open and the lights on.
Right.
But they knew inherently there was risk to it.
Right. So if I wanted to start from scratch and build a new browser that has all the privacy and security controls in it, where would I start?
That's a great question. In 2020, when we started Island, it had already really taken form that Chromium had become the standard for the modern browser. So Chromium's the open source package that powers Chrome, Edge, Brave, Opera, many of the other variants. And it's really become the standard, not not because you believe in Google or Microsoft or any of the other vendors. It's become the standard because of the way the user experience is. The way it renders and paints the screen, the way you can bookmark, save passwords, that's become our favorite. That's what we're comfortable with. So that's become the enterprise browser, if you will, by default. And so that's where we started. We started with the exact same user experience. It's not in the cloud. It's not rendering pixels to a browser.
Right.
It's an actual browser that the end user can leverage.
Because that's been the other approach to this is don't run the browser locally, run it up in the cloud, only show the pictures of it. That would isolate the browser and therefore isolate any potential attacks. Your approach was a little different. Give the end user something on the endpoint to use Chromium as the base, and then create security wrappers around it.
That's right. And so by benefiting, by actually being the browser itself, think of the things that simplify, right? I'm pre and post encryption. So worrying about the cipher and how to break and inspect it and be on the wire and try to figure out, are you really moving data through that channel or not? It becomes really simple for me. I see everything the user's trying to do, and I see everything the web server's returning with. And then by policy, I can determine what's acceptable or not acceptable.
So you don't need a man in the middle.
No man in the middle. It's wonderful.
Yes, it is. All right, so I start with Chromium. What's the first security control capability you put into that new browser?
So we called it last mile controls. And so if you think about what are the things that are missing from your cloud technologies and your gateway and your network technologies, it's everything that happens with that user at the keyboard, at the monitor, right? It's can they copy and paste that data? Can they take a screenshot of that data? So we call these last mile controls because it's truly the controls at the actual action. And so we built those in as our first, which are copy and paste controls. But not just can you copy and paste. Where can you copy from and where can you paste to?
Oh, interesting.
Because it's not good enough to just say I blocked all copy and paste. You'd see crazy end user revolt, right? And so what we've said is we'll give you the opportunity to build a boundary of data, a boundary of applications where people can share data across them but nowhere else. We did the same logic with print and save and screenshots, and that's something in 20 years of cyber I've never been able to prevent is somebody taking a screen capture. But thanks to the likes of streaming apps, operating systems like Mac and Linux and Windows have really built in DRM. So now we can call DRM functions and actually prevent the screen capture from actually happening.
It's interesting. So you're actually building almost like a DLP within the browser.
Yes.
Right? Because that's what DLPs are trying to do, right?
Absolutely.
Right? They're trying to control what you can copy, paste, move, save around in this new data security world. But instead of doing it at the endpoint, per se, I mean, you're doing it at the browser, which runs on an endpoint, but you're embedding DLP really into the browser.
Exactly. And at the browser, I can get far more granular than DLP can traditionally get. So I'll give you a great example. We have a call center customer that said, listen, most of my call center employees are still remote. Any PII data, even though the application's going to serve it, I want it redacted by default.
Oh.
Then I want my call center employee to selectively unmask the data they actually require to complete the call. On the back end, we send log files that said, hey, Brian unredacted this data at this time. So you have full attribution as to what happened. But that's something DLP can't do because it's literally looking at packets on the wire saying, is this data okay to be displayed?
Right. Where you're actually affecting the DOM.
You got it.
Right.
Exactly.
So you're doing it right at JSON layer, right?
Now you get it. So now if you think about that, what else can I do? And this is where we integrate very tightly with the business operations because there's many things. You think about financial services sector, you see these big finance companies getting fined because of WhatsApp and LinkedIn messaging, which is unregulated because it's untracked. We can render LinkedIn without the messaging component. We can render LinkedIn without the post buttons. So we can actually exert complete control over what gets displayed to that end user.
So yeah, I mean that's kind of cool, right? Because now you're affecting what gets displayed from the DOM based on the JSON that's coming back from the service. But how easy is it to manage then? Because that's the other thing, right? Is granular control is awesome, but it comes sometimes with a cost of administration.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And so what we found is, and we're 70 customers deep at this point, which is a remarkable blessing for where we are in our journey. But what we found is a lot of every one of those last mile controls I talked about, because we integrate with identity, it's really simple to say, by your role, here are the things I'm going to allow.
Right.
And those are all radio button turn on, turn off, select the apps you want to create a boundary with. When you start getting into, I want to modify the application, then yes, there is a little customization to that. But where you're doing it in areas where you have no other choice. You know, you think about an old application that you built 10 years ago, I want to add multi-factor auth. Well, the browser can enforce multi-factor auth. So what's better, doing it there, slight customization, or reconvening a development team to actually go build that functionality?
Right. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting use cases. All policy driven under
All
the
policy.
covers.
Yep.
So basically, you authenticate into your browser based on who you are and what policies you have. It dictates what gets rendered, what doesn't get rendered, and
Exactly.
all the control.
You get we splash a home screen to the user, much like we've been taught with Okta and IDPs. You have this home screen.
Yep.
But it's completely dependent on policy. So, I'll give you a great example. Like my home screen when I'm on my work PC, my managed PC has all of my applications. When I go home and work for my BYOD, there's a few of them that are missing. I can't touch our production environment. I can't do certain things. So because we understand the device we're inherently installed on, benefit of being locally installed,
right,
we can actually actuate different policy based on what we're seeing at the OS layer.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. And then you were also talking about customization. Like you can customize the look, the feel. Like every company can have its own kind of look and feel, what its browser looks like.
Yeah, so, I kind of tongue-in-cheek always say we built the enterprise browser to be your enterprise's browser, and that's exactly right. We envision organizations taking the look, the logo, the icons, the look and feel of the address bar, the dialogue messages that get presented to the end user. All of that can be customized and tuned, so you're giving your employee the experience they expect when they're working at your company.
Benefits of a secure browser? Probably immeasurable.
I don't know how long we have left. In all reality, there's a couple things right off the bat that really strike a chord. Number one, we give you full visibility, so you can imagine as the browser, we see every action that's taken.
Yeah.
And so organizationally, and this is a policy decision, you can run the spectrum from, I want to record every single thing that user's doing in this application because they're doing a wire transfer, SWIFT, to this person's in their personal health care, I want to anonymize it and not see anything, and only report violations back. And so we can run the gamut. When you think of organizations in EMEA that have to do with works councils, and the works councils like us because we give end user indicators as to whether the organization's monitoring your actions, whether you're browsing privately and anonymously, so you can be very clear on those things. So visibility is a big one, control, and then the other big one is organizations still to this day struggle with unmanaged devices, whether they're third-party contractors or trying to do BYOD, and so we are a very simple way to get a foothold on an unmanaged device.
Right. Yeah, because if you can't get to the application,
what
you
are you
don't
doing?
get there. Right.
Yeah.
You're not doing anything.
That's right.
So yeah, I mean, it's a great way to deal with, the shadow IT discussion is it doesn't exist. Or at least you can identify it
right off the bat
and deal with it.
That's right.
And help with the overall asset management problem, which we still have in the industry. All right, did we cover all of your good features?
I swear, you must have hit them all, yeah.
Did I hit them all?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Brian, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Cheers.
If anybody wants to learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/island RSAC. Thank you for watching and listening.